details.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad that you're here. We have an agenda. Brian, please put it up on the screen for us. Looks like it might already be there. We do have a busy one today. So welcome, everyone. We did have President's Day, so government didn't entirely shut down on Monday, but a lot of our great state employees were spending time with family, and the legislature, of course, was in full bore. Yesterday heard some great orators coming from our Senate delegation, our congressional delegation, and as well from the chair of Salish Kootenai. So it was a great day yesterday. It took a majority of the afternoon, the work session between the House and the Senate, and then on to their committees. So welcome, everybody. February is waning, and we are seeing what is going to be next. So the agenda, let's go ahead. And I do believe we have Mr. Sam Schaefer on. Sam works with the Legislative Fiscal Division. Good morning, Sam. What I'm impressed and why he is visiting with us today is another linking of what is happening with our economy, but more importantly, things that might be dealing with dollars that flow into the guarantee account that, of course, fund our public schools. So, Mr. Schaefer, welcome. Glad that you're here. This is being recorded. So if we don't have a large venue of individuals that are being participants today, this is something that will be on our website. So good morning, Sam.
We can't hear you.
Yep, Sam, there seems to be a challenge. We aren't be able to hear your voice.
What about now?
Gotcha.
Yeah, we got it.
Perfect. Switching between Teams and Zoom and everything, but we're good. All right, so the superintendent asked me to share some work that I've done for MARA, which is a newly created interim committee, which essentially looks at the long-term stability of Montana's budget. You know, during the legislative session, most of the time it's pretty much a 2 or 4 year look. But with this committee, we are tasked with, you know, a more 10 or 20 year window just to see, you know, where spending might go, what the revenue streams will look like, and see if, into the future, there may be a problem. And if you know about a problem before it arrives, you have, better tools to address that problem. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see this? We're good? Perfect. So at this, and I'm going to go through bits and pieces of this because I don't want to take too long. This is a few years dated now, but for revenue forecasting purposes, have access to all tax return data in the state. And about 3 months ago, I actually got the calendar year 2021 data. And once I have more time and the legislature leaves town, I'll be able to update this with calendar 2021 numbers. This is calendar 2020, but it sort of gets the picture across. So like to preface this by saying, I'm going to say individuals a lot, or I'm going to say residents a lot. What these are tax returns. Okay, so if I say there were 8 residents, I'm talking there were 8 tax returns filed. So the data in here, they're good proxies for households. Sometimes like I said, I'll interchange and say residents a lot. What I'm talking about are tax returns filed. All right, so let's start here. So in calendar 2020, there were about 18,000 partial year forms that were filed in the state. Okay, a partial year form, as the name would imply, is a form or an individual that was here for part of the year. So they declared residency in Montana for part of the year. So this could be someone who lived in the state for 4 months and then left, or it could be an individual who moved to the state. Okay, well, we also have non-residents, and then we have full year residents, someone who's here for the entirety of the year. So there were 11,000 forms of partial year filers that left the state. And then, like I said earlier, there were 18,000 plus partial year forms of new filers to Montana, which means there was a net positive of, 6,661 new forms filed in the state from people moving here. So like I said, that's a proxy for households. So the true net migration in is going to be a minimum of 6,661, likely quite a bit bigger if there's 2 or 3 or 4 people in a household. That top chart shows where people are coming from. So, sort of anecdotal evidence, what you hear on the street. It's a lot of people on the West Coast. That's true. You can see California had the most people moving here, followed by Washington, Colorado, then Oregon. Then we can also look at where people are leaving Montana too. That's in the yellow chart. And the top 3 states where partial year residents of Montanans who were in Montana then left were Washington, Idaho, then Arizona. So in terms of where these new residents, this now is the people coming to Montana, the new tax forms being filed in Montana. In sheer numbers, really no surprise, right? It's the Gallatin, it's the Flathead, it's Missoula Valley, Billings, then Lewis and Clark County. It's sort of our big urban areas as far as Montana is concerned. So no surprise here. Where are the majority of people moving in terms of just counts or numbers? It's the big 3. It's the Gallatin, the Flathead, then Missoula Valley. In terms of growth rates, once again, this is looking at new forms filed divided by total existing forms filed. You can see that Gallatin County, and this has been the case for many, many years now, had the strongest growth of 5.2%, followed by Madison County, which is actually a little more rural county, and then Flathead County, Sanders, Lincoln, Mineral, which is actually interesting because when you look at growth within the county, as far as what may an existing resident sort of experience, it's not necessarily the urban counties that are seeing the biggest growth as a percentage. They certainly are when you just look at the count of new individuals moving there. But some of these counties, especially on the Montana-Idaho corridor here, are seeing, quite a bit of growth relative to their existing population. And if you look at it by sort of an age cohort, On the individual tax forms, the only way you can get a sense of the age of an individual, because these are confidential, Montana does provide an interest exemption for those over the age of 65. So I can use that particular qualifier as a way to get a sense of, okay, how old are the individuals that are attached to this tax form? And if you look at those under 65, once again, a lot of growth in Gallatin County, Madison County, you can see the rest of them. But then when you look at more of a retirement age individual, it's really more rural. So when we look at retirees moving to the state, they are, generally moving towards, more rural areas. In those rural areas, Sanders, Monroe, Lincoln County, going from northwest Montana south along the Idaho border, they are seeing quite a bit of growth, especially in their retirement age. But even if you look at the growth under 65, you have Lincoln, Sanders, and Monroe County again. So when you look at sheer numbers, certainly the more urban areas, but when you look at growth of an existing county, rural counties are experiencing growth as well. So these next few slides look at income levels that are attached to these tax returns. And one thing that I didn't do, I didn't look at, income earned in Montana, because I wanted an apples to apples comparison, because someone might have only been here 3 months. So I'm not going to look at their Montana source income. What every tax filer files before filing, their state return is a federal form, and I have the federal numbers. So I'm looking at federal adjusted gross income. That way I can compare someone who moved to Montana and lived here 4 months to an existing resident who was here for the full year. Both taxpayers would actually go and calculate their federal adjusted gross income. So I'm going to skip through this slide because I'll talk about it in a second. So first, I looked at the median federal adjusted gross income. Just remember, median is the middle value. You sort your federal adjusted gross income list in ascending order. You pick the middle value. And actually, when you look at residents compared to new residents across all ages, residents actually had a median federal adjusted gross income that was greater than people or new tax forms being filed in the state. The same was true for those under the age of 65. But when you look at the retirement age, those individuals moving here by quite a large margin have a higher median federal adjusted gross income than existing residents. One thing I will say is that with this under 65, and there's no way of knowing, but my guess is that there are a lot of, college age students who are declaring residency here. And there might be enough of them to where the median, you end up having a median value that is being pulled down because there's a lot of new careers or low income individuals because, they're in universities here in the States. So just a conjecture, there's no way I can look and see if that's the case. But since we're only looking at about 18,000 individuals, if there's a few thousand of them that are college age, that would definitely impact the median and pull it down. One thing though is when we're looking at this for the purpose of examining what our tax base will look like moving forward, if there are very high income individuals moving to the state, that would be captured in the average federal adjusted gross income. And when we look at the average federal adjusted gross income for the same set, you get a very, very different picture. So the median is not influenced by high earners. Like I said, it's just the middle value. But if we look at average federal adjusted gross income, where those outliers or those high earners do impact the calculation of the average, you can see that across all ages for those under 65. And once again, especially for that retirement age cohort on the far right, new resident tax forms that were filed in the state had significantly higher average FAGI, federal adjusted gross income, than existing residents. And the reason for that is the individuals in the tax forms in that upper decile, that top 10%. And you can see that third bullet on the left, the top 10% of new resident filers in calendar 2020 had an average federal adjusted gross income of about 600,000 compared to the top 10% of existing Montana residents of about 300,000. So once again, these are really households, not necessarily individuals, but the top 10% were almost double that of full-time residents compared to these new residents moving to the state. And these are individuals who are declaring residency in the state. They have, in some instances, significant wealth, and they are paying tax here. They do have tax liabilities to the state. So, you could say, well, it's just a few individuals, or, that's just the top 10% who are driving these averages up. Yes, but they do have tax liabilities. And when all is said and done, they will contribute if there's tax compliance, and it looks like there is from what I've looked at, they will contribute to, the general fund revenues moving forward. And like I said, this 10%, I said there were 18,000 new filers moving to the state. So that's a number based on 1,800 new tax forms. We're not just talking like, 50 or 100 or 300 new tax forms. That's on almost 2,000 tax forms. So take a quick step back. What this chart shows, one thing, every tax form has a unique GenTax ID. So for instance, if I file taxes, maybe my GenTax ID at the Department of Revenue for confidentiality purposes is 1234. Then I file taxes the next year. My GenTax ID is still 1234. So I can match those IDs and look at someone who moved here in calendar 19. So earlier we were looking at calendar 20. Now we're looking at calendar 19. I looked at individuals who moved here in 19, and then what happened to their incomes once they were in Montana for a full year. Remember, maybe 5-6 years ago, there was always sort of the Montana discount we talked about. Okay, in order to enjoy, the mountains, all these things, sometimes you had to take a pay cut. This would suggest that that's really no longer the case, because what this is showing is the income levels of individuals who moved here in 19, that's the yellow, and then what did their incomes do once they were here a full year in 2020. So you can see across all ages, average incomes went from 75,000 to 85,000. For the working age cohort, under 65, they went from 70,000 to 74,000. And then from that retirement age, there was a significant jump. A lot of that is probably a good capital gains year, is my guess. But incomes went from an average of 140,000 to 226,000. So that last bullet there in bold, my statement is, okay, look at the under 65. People moved here in 19, and then we're here a whole year in 2020, and their incomes, even after moving, went up on average 5% for that under 65 cohort. So that means one of two things. These individuals either found similar or higher paying jobs once they moved here, or due to the more remote nature of how things have shifted, they likely brought their jobs with them. Like I said in the past, I would have thought as people moved to the state, maybe in 2017, they take a little pay cut. That is not what's happening with individuals who are moving here now. When we look at the average, sure, there are some people who do, but when you look at average amounts, incomes are staying at least the same, but they're actually increasing after moving to Montana. So my guess is a lot of remote work. And like I said, people might be, wage pressures have been driven up in the state recently, as we all know. So what do the income types look like of those people who moved here in 19, and then they were here a whole year in calendar 2020? On the left-hand side, that's those individuals who moved here in 19. On the right-hand side, that's full year residents. So you can see, no surprise, dominated by wages, 64%, almost 2/3 of that was wages, some capital gains, and then some retirement income. For existing residents, a little less wages than the new people moving here, but quite a bit more rental income. And that makes sense. Montanans who have been here a while have had the ability to acquire property and sort of, establish some rental income, 12% of their income portfolio, compared to people who moved here in 19, that rental income only makes up about 4% of that portfolio. So this chart here is looking at people who, yellow is people who moved here in 19, and now we're looking at their entire calendar 2020 income, and that's being compared to full year residents 2020 income in the blue. So moved in 19, have now been here a full year in calendar 2020, that's the yellow, compared to full year residents in the blue. And you can see across, once again, average income levels, except really for that rental income. The new residents moving here on average have higher average income buckets, whether it be wages, whether it be capital gains, retirement income, actually a little less social security and rental income, but capital gains and wages are on average higher than existing residents. And if we break this out by age, you can see that on the left-hand side, no surprise for the under 65 individuals moving here compared to full year residents, it's pretty much dominated by wages. It's not a surprise there. But if you look at the over 65, you can see that those new residents who are coming here, at least in calendar 2020, moved here in 19, were then here an entire year in calendar 2020, had, higher wages, higher IRA income, higher retirement income, and significantly higher capital gains income than calendar 2020 full year residents. So I have a few other slides I sent it out to look at, but in the interest of time, I'll stop sharing there. The plan is probably this summer. My guess is I'll have calendar 2021 data, which is really the year when we saw the largest population growth. I think calendar 2020, we ran at about 1%. And then in calendar 21, we ran at about 1.6% growth. So I've actually started working on it, but legislative requests have segued my time and resources for the time being. But the goal is this summer. There will be an updated one with calendar 2021. I'm guessing the patterns will hold. And it'll be interesting to look at, calendar 19 individuals who moved here. What did their income do in 20, which we saw, and then what did it do in 21? And then I can look at the calendar 2020 people who moved here and see, okay, what did their incomes do once they were here a whole year? So long story short, we're looking at what sort of started this project was what's the impact of aging demographics in Montana? And we started this in fiscal 19. And what does that mean for our tax base moving forward? Especially if an individual retires and then there is not an individual to fill the job that they vacated. What does that mean for the tax base? But then we've had so much in-migration in the past 2 or 3 years now that maybe that won't be an issue. So the focus of this research has been, okay, what do these new residents mean for our tax base moving forward? And so far what we've seen is that, they have positive and in some cases quite large tax liabilities, and at least to a degree have contributed to significant growth in individual income tax collections over the past 2 years. So I will end at that.
Thank you, Sam. Any questions for our expert here? So Sam, I have one. We talk about the COVID factor. Can you shed any light on the numbers that you've shared from pre-COVID-19 to COVID-20? We're going to get the 21 numbers this summer. Any indication, crystal ball on what the COVID, the pandemic may have impacted with either entrance level into Montana or the level of income of those individuals?
Yeah, so the calendar 2020 data, which I went over now, that was, we had essentially one summer. That was the summer coming out of lockdown in the state and people started to move here. Calendar 2021 is when, like I said, we had the largest population growth thus far. Like I said, it was 1.6%. Calendar 2022, I don't think was that high. I think we can all kind of see things have kind of settled down a little bit, especially in, the housing market, things like that. And at a certain point, unless the housing is available, it's tough for people to move here. What I've seen in the preliminary data in calendar 2021, which is no surprise, More people moved here than 2020, and what we're seeing is, once again, higher incomes on average than existing Montanans, which would suggest, high income retirees, or, in some instances, though I can't see explicitly, it's certainly implied that it's a lot of remote work, more than what we saw. I'm not saying like 70% of new people coming here, it's remote work, but I'm saying a much larger proportion than what we saw in the past. So continued trends of what I just showed you, and accelerated trends.
Thank you, Sam. You're speaking to an audience of K-12 and post-secondary. Anything to draw that analogy of, that entity that is moving into our state, any impact that might have on K-12 or post-secondary education?
Off the top of my head, obviously the state the state general fund is a significant funding source of base aid. Obviously there's local property tax that fund the bulk of school districts, but the largest spend out of the general fund is base aid. So and right now the general fund is funded by close to 65% individual income tax. We've become an income tax state. 20 years ago, individual income tax made up 45% of our general fund. Now it's 65%. So, which in one sense is not a great, sort of proportion, because it's also a quite volatile source. So when the largest source of funding for the general fund is individual income tax, which has the ability to swing up and down rapidly, that can pose budget issues into the future. But in the sense that individuals seem to be moving here with higher than average tax liabilities, that certainly contributes in a positive way to the general fund, which then contributes in a positive way to school funding, since that's the biggest general fund spend. So that's sort of a big picture look off the top of my head. One thing is, if a lot of these individuals have, and what we saw, at least in the retirement age, they are very capital intensive income portfolios. And when you have a capital heavy income portfolio, that's, wages aren't volatile. Wages are very robust, and they're even robust in recessions for the most part. Things like retirement income, pension income, social security income, pretty stable. Capital gains income is not stable. That has the ability to go really high in 1 year, and then 2 years later, it can go really, really low. So in the sense that some of these individuals are, capital heavy during good years, it certainly contributes a positive way. But then when there's bad years, you may see very, low, if not negative tax liabilities. So in a perfect world, it would be stable sources of income coming here. But on the high end, which is no surprise, it's more of an unstable source. But, long-term, individuals moving here who contribute to the tax base, that is, if you want to fund services, that is a positive factor, is what I'd say.
Thank you, Sam. Any further questions? This information will be going out to you as our meeting concludes, and Sam's information also will be there. So Angela, you just put something into the chat. Would you like to add anything, or are you on your way?
I have to go to another call, but I just wanted to thank Sam for the excellent report. Sam's a former student of mine, and I would have given him an A+ on that.
Oh, good.
Very well done. Outstanding. I can't wait to dig through the slides, and I might just be following up with a question or two, especially about the students and residency. That's
Excellent.
good. So great
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Angela. Sam, thank you so much for this.
All right.
We'll flow your information, and thank you for the good work you do for the MARA committee.
Yes, thank you.
As K-12 is part of that very large chunk. We just want to keep our thumbs on that future view for sustainability for our public schools. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sam.
you. Have a great
Enjoy
day,
the
everyone.
rest of your day. Thank
Bye.
you. All right, Wendy, we're on to the next. This is our monthly update. We're halfway through with our ESSER COVID-related funding. Give you the microphone.
All right. So we're gonna talk just about looking at, again, the spending of ESSER. We are in that mode of ESSER 1, 2, 3, 1 having been spent out, which is wonderful. And now we're moving into the 2 and 3 with the deadlines of September 30th, 2023 for Carissa, which is the 2, and then the 2024 mark for the ARP. And I kind of did this slide here to show you how we are in comparison from a June standpoint in the black, and then the red being as of December 31st of this last year, showing how much we've spent down in each of these pockets. And this is just from a national view, so you can go on at any point and choose any states that you want to look at, but it does indicate that we are about 40% finished with spending the funding, and we are continuing to work in the mode of both the allocation of the funds, but also having those projects that the funding has been allocated for fully spent out. This slide is available to you, and we'll move into the district view. I'm sorry, into the trustee view. Thank you, Brian. So this is a report that is sent out monthly again to all of the trustees at the school districts, and it shows a very high level of each one of those pockets of funding for the district itself. So you can go and just kind of look at a very high level there. And then if you want more detail, you can look at the district view. Thank you, Brian. And just one page down, this is a PDF file. And so you can just search for any particular district, and then it breaks it out by how those funds are being used and in what pockets. And I know that right now there's concern about how the projects that this funding is currently being used for, how that will be sustained going into the future. And I think the information that Sam just provided us can be a really good catch, in that as those entities who are moving into our state look toward how can we help the community that we're now becoming a part of, this can be a reach out for them. If districts have successful programs that they're running and they've been using ESSER funds, and they can share that out to the public and say, come alongside and be a part of our process that's been very successful as some of these funds start to be lessened. Some of those individuals who may be moving into the state are actually looking for opportunities to partner with schools. And so that may be an opportunity for you on the ground level at each district to look for the community to build in those partnerships for some of the funding. Any questions with these two views? It's done monthly, provides a lot of information.
I just know, Wendy, that we had a trustee from Ravalli County, one of the school districts in Ravalli County yesterday, just querying, what is left. And his purpose was school safety. What could they use for structural purposes right now? And of course, these dollars are very permissible for school safety. So we've connected him up with some other entities, and we encourage anybody who has any questions, of course, please get a hold of Wendy, and we'll answer as much as we possibly can on the fluidity of the dollars, where the dollars are that we know of, and then encourage our districts to be as transparent as possible with their constituents. So
thank you, Superintendent. And I think that's, a very strong point, that these funds are very flexible in their allowable use. And so I think a lot of times if districts aren't sure about how to spend the funds, or aren't sure, is this an allowable use, just reach out and we can easily walk them through how to make that expenditure work within the processing and guidelines that we have to use. As we move forward, the next thing which will be on our plate is going to be the data collection, the annual reports. And that really is just a view and looking at how funding has currently been spent. We have gotten guidance from the Department of Ed that they will be providing us with some files of past data submissions. So this year we'll be sharing out, this is what's already been reported, and then asking districts to just fill in the pieces that are missing. So we're hoping that that view will be a little bit easier this time around. It's still a heavy data pull, but it should be a process that will be a little bit more familiar this time around.
thank you. Any other questions you might have for Wendy as we progress through this? As I said it in my introduction of Wendy, We're halfway through. It's really important that that view of what the other states look like. Montana is on track, and I'm very pleased that our districts are recognizing the value of the investment of these COVID monies. But we don't want to get to the end because there is no other way except to give it back. So I think it's a real strong message as we're halfway in the middle of this stream that we get to the other side. And Wendy, with your leadership and your team, we're going to get there. For sure. Excellent. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sindrud, let's give us a view of where we are with the data modernization, another investment of COVID monies.
Good morning, Superintendent. Good morning, everyone. Brian, did you have the slideshow or just the document? I can share my screen if we want to run through. There we go. Perfect. Well, again, good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Sindrud. I'm the CIO for OPI. I've been here a little over 9 months and have started to assemble and have assembled a great team in front of you. We have Andy Campbell, Ashley Perez, Brett Carter, and Nicole Thuat. And these people work really hard to help manage our IT and our data to make sure that those systems are, one, providing good, solid information, but two, also providing a resource for the schools, the administrators, and everyone else to access data. Go ahead and hit the next slide there, Brian, if you would, please. Thank you. So our modernization, we had to take a little bit of a turn with our modernization. We are going out to RFP. We're working with the Department of Administration on getting that built and ready to go. This slide right here is a base timeline of what we're looking at from a phased approach. Phase one, if you look, there is where we would or will be anticipating where we're going to update and build our foundational systems and then start consolidating some of the areas where we need to by July 1st for the Chapter 55 changes. Then in phase two, once that system is leveled out and we have actually started to integrate some of the current systems that we have, we are looking at consolidation or replacement of some of these systems that we do have. We're going to try to get down to a count of, from what we have seen with other states, down to under 10 is what our goal is. Currently, we have about 75 systems. So the data flows here, there, and everywhere, and we're trying to manage that. And it can be quite the challenge some days to make sure that we have good things moving and the data flow in a clean, concise manner. Along with that, phase two, this is kind of the exciting part. We're looking at how can we integrate the system with the data flow from the schools and getting that data much more seamlessly and easily flowing to OPI from the districts. That I'll show you on the next slide here in a bit. And then the phase three is where we're looking at consolidating some more of our systems, analyzing to figure out exactly what those purposes and functions are to continue to slim down the data efforts of entry at the school level. Let's go ahead and hit the next slide, Brian, if you would, please.
So Chris, just to show you, the clouds that you had all there, the old OPI, and I'm sure old technology, you'd buy it and then you would either buy the opportunity to build it within and buy an entity who would maintain that. Because of those clouds, things are up on the cloud right now. And what you do is you buy a maintenance agreement rather than buying an entity or a person that would build or rebuild or fix or however that would be. It's kind of like that old understanding of that Maytag repairman. You want to buy that insurance that is there. And that's pretty much what I'm looking at is the sustainability of buying these maintenance agreements to maintain not an entity here at the OPI, but to maintain a relationship with an entity on the cloud. So sorry to take that over, Chris.
No, you're right on. You're spot on there, Superintendent. Thank you for that. I will digress just a little bit here. A good example of that is our Teach Montana system, our TMT. We went out in 2001 or 2021. My my mistake, and look for a certification tracking system for licensure to make sure that we could build a new system for that. We found a company that could actually do that for us. They had a system that was already COTS, commercial off the shelf. They modified it for us from that standpoint, and we fired it up and got it running June 1st of this year. It significantly improved the efforts of our certification team, licensure team, to go through and make things much faster from the review standpoint, much easier for the teachers to submit their information to make sure that when they did get their licenses renewed, that they have smooth and easy communication. That system, however, did come with a cost. The maintenance cost for those that need to know is running around $180,000 a year. So, which is right in line and in tow with what other systems would be for something of that nature. On the other hand, if you look back to that phase one, we have the single sign-on. We actually hired a contracting company to build that for us as well. It wasn't necessarily COTS, but that development of that was within the same line of tools that we currently use within OPI, and some updated tools as well. So it can port forward into a new environment for us. That system was about $160,000, if I have my numbers correct. That system will be a lot more easily maintained because there really isn't going to be much changing on that unless we're changing applications. Any questions there? Super. All right, now we can hit that next slide, Brian. Thanks. So the back to the trying to get the school's information from them to us for all the functions and purposes that it's needed. We're looking at a data lake type technology. Snowflake is one of the ones that we're looking at that the state has already purchased and is using with a couple agencies up the hill. What the one that we're looking at is built and used by PowerSchool. PowerSchool, in discussions with them for our one of the SISs that's covered within the state, can help us translate and migrate that data that we need much more easily than the current processes that are in place. And so that's one of the ways that we're looking at trying to improve that functionality and system, is by using the data lake technology. Now, there are costs that go along with that. If you look from the triangle going into the data lake, it's really more of a data storage fee that goes along with that. Where if you look at the arrow coming out of the Snowflake and going into OPI, there will be a consumption fee that goes along with that. We're looking at that to figure out exactly where and how that could come about and how we would need to fund that. Keeping in mind that the vast majority of our districts right now utilize Infinite Campus as opposed to PowerSchool. Percentage of the students are right there, almost 50-50, if you will. But we have a lot more districts that are using the Infinite Campus at this point in time. Now, the challenge with that is we have to take and utilize that data within all of our processes for doing everything from providing information for the legislature, for the superintendent, for other state entities, or the federal government with our EdFacts reporting. So one of the other aspects of the Snowflake data lake type technology that would help us is the data that can and could be consumed by state entities could also access that data through that same process. It would just be us on the sending in or putting the data into the data lake. Now, that data lake technology, that kind of the nice part about that is actually we, as the administrators of that, would actually give the access to that system for the entities and the information that they would be authorized and allowed to utilize. So we would have that safety and security net that goes along with that technology. Any questions? Superintendent, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think we're moving. The state, if you look at the big yellow puddle that's there, the data lake, the state is the entity that owns this. So we just want to make sure that, as you know, Sam visited about that, the investment is precious. The dollars come from our Montanans, whether they're new ones or whether they are our existing Montanans. We want to make sure that we do the best with the investment. There is an opportunity right now with legislation on knowing what is going to be inside that flow and making sure that student privacy, that data is still allowed to be shared, is something that the legislature will be discussing after transmittal. But we've looked at the bills, we've put some blood, sweat, and tears into what this even looks like. Knowing where we are, and then asking our state entities, you know, what is it that you would like, so that we can use that investment of that precious tax dollar to the betterment of our state. Thanks, Chris.
You're very, very welcome, Superintendent. There's one more slide real quick. I can run through it in a heartbeat here. Basically, this is just a graphical representation of the different phases and what we're looking at doing. And as Superintendent mentioned earlier, is we have those 3 clouds down at the base, which is where our foundational systems are right now. And that's the whole area where we need to come up to speed with a newer foundation, servers and databases and whatnot to utilize. That way we don't have to worry about maintaining those. We're looking at hosting those out in the cloud. That's where that foundation would come from. Then phase 2 is where that data lake technology and work would come into play. And then phase 3 is where we would need help from pretty much everybody that's on this call and from the districts as well. Where do we see our future going? What kinds of things do we want to chase or implement that would be for the betterment of our students and our districts? And so that to me is really the fun part. But of course, as everybody knows, that's the icing on the cake. We got a lot of work ahead of us to take care of that and get to that point. With that, I'll open it up for any other questions if there are. All right.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. No, the team is hard at work at this. We did give the Department of Administration the RFP and all the things that we have worked on together, and great communication is flowing back and forth. And hopefully we can move forward with a product before schools adjourn. That's what our goal is, to make sure that our schools that we serve recognize exactly what we're doing at the state level. So this information will be flowing to you as soon as we conclude our discussion. MAST, let's talk about that Montana Alternative Student Testing Program. Crystal, welcome.
Good morning, Superintendent and Education Advocate team members. I'm glad to be with you this morning. Brian, thanks for getting our one-pager up there. I'm not going to read through this, but there is some valuable information on here. We also plan on presenting this to the Board of Public Ed here in the next couple of weeks, so they will have this review, and it will also be on our website. So lots of places to find this information that's on there, and if you want to take some time to read through it as I present, you're obviously more than welcome to. So my name is Crystal Smith. I am the new director of MAST with my new title of Education Innovation Manager for the Office of Public Instruction. Just a brief update, as this is my first Ed Advocate presentation. I want to make sure that we're all up to speed. So we have currently completed the testing window 1 and 2 for the MAST project. We have had test scores reported to districts on Monday, February 13th, and tomorrow myself and my program manager are holding a teacher feedback and input session to gather data from those who are participating, as well as a support session to review the student reports as they were made available last week. The next window, remember there's 4 windows in this first year of pilot. The next window will open on March 6th with our final window opening in mid-April. We know and we've had some dialogue regarding SBAC testing coming up and how districts are looking to strategically schedule and stay with our pilot, as we know that we need at least 1,200 student participants for all of our categories in order to have legitimate data and data fields. So we're providing guidance out to the field on how districts can strategically schedule both their SBAC testing and the mass testing to ensure that students are well rested, well prepared, but also are not over tested, as districts have made a tremendous sacrifice to be a part of our mass program in the hopes of, bigger things to come, which is eventually moving to mass as our state assessment. I'll just be brief and encourage you. We currently have 44 school districts that are participating, but as we look to expand our pilot, you can see there in our timeline for the school year 23-24 that we are in the near process of beginning recruitment to add more districts and more students to our pilot. We're currently testing math and English in grades 5 and 7. Next year, we're looking to expand grades 3 through 8 to really have some true data cohorts and being able to look at what data looks like for that entire 3 through 8 process. So my encouragement and invitation to those of you who are reviewing this presentation and may look at it a later date is to share the good news of mass. There's been tremendous work both within our agency, within our state, but then our external partners as well, both nationally and even internationally. So I encourage you to share this information with districts, encourage them to participate, as we're all really trying to link hands and efforts together to do something incredible, not only for the state of Montana, but really to put Montana on the map nationally when we look at assessment and how assessment can be brief, can be have a relevancy of immediacy of feedback, and also really indicate and drive student learning instead of a one-time end of the year assessment. So superintendent, that is all that I have, and happy to answer any questions if there's some out there.
Thank you. Any questions for Crystal? Great presentation, by the way, A+. And Education Advocates is once a month. We'll be going to the Board of Public Ed as well. We have invited the board to be part of our discussion in the intimacy with the vendor and everything in how we are chaperoning this. Our Education Advocates, and I know Will may have jumped off, but we invited all of our delegation, congressional delegation, to take part in these, and they will get this information. Our biggest part of this is to say that, yes, we want that summative test to be removed, and we want teaching and learning to be closest to when things are being assessed. And we are going to be asking the federal government through this pilot to remove the ones that are taking this alternate test at this point, to be removed from that summative, so they don't get hit twice with that ugly assessment stick, that they participate fully within what Montana is offering. Montana is one of 10 states that is working through this innovation discussion right now, and we are very unique. And we believe that our Montana teachers know how to assess in the classroom, and that's what this model is about. Crystal, thank you so much for your expertise. Great presentation.
Thanks, Superintendent. See you all later.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes more, and I want to just share that we have Mr. Stutz at this point. So let me go ahead and get us to where we need to be and move Mr. Stutz into the picture. Mr. Stutz, he is our chief legal here. Welcome.
Morning, everybody. So let's review where we are mid-session with the legislature. We've got transmittal break coming up in the very near future. At the end of next week, we've got the transmittal deadline for general bills, and that'll have the transmittal break after that. Lots of progress here at OPI. We had 4 legislative priorities, and I'm happy to say that there's been good action on all 4 of them. Our top 4 were our base aid renewal, our teacher licensure fees, audiology equipment, that would be a one-time only funding, and getting tuition payments for students who are in residential group homes And all four of those are moving forward nicely. So if you have any questions about the specific of those four priorities, I'm happy to field them. But more generally, there are a number of other legislative bills that we were working with legislators on. And I just want to highlight a few that have seen some really great progress. One of them is House Bill 504. That's Representative Hastings is carrying that bill. It had its first hearing last Friday, and that bill would empower parents by requiring school districts to have a common grievance process. That would be 504, a common grievance process across the state. And really exciting that the Montana School Boards Association and MONPAC supported that bill. It's similar to the grievance policy that a number of school districts have, but it provides additional protections for parents to ensure that they've got sufficient time after an informal attempt at resolution, sufficient time to ensure they can file a formal complaint if things aren't able to get resolved. So that one's a bill that's moving forward, and I'm glad to be a part of it. It was one of OPI's legislative ideas.
And it was a partnership.
Indeed. So another bill that went to hearing in front of House Education last Friday is House Bill 503. That is would basically update the requirements for teacher licensures to be more akin to the licensures that other professions have. And in particular, it requires teachers to maintain a current license, a current address with the licensing agency, which in this case is the Office of Public Instruction. And that was heard on Friday. And again, that one was being carried by Representative Hastings. We have a couple of bills that TRS, Teachers Retirement Service, is carrying. They're not OPI specific bills, they're TRS bills, but they're consistent with OPI priorities to allow some additional flexibility for teachers who have retired to be able to come back and continue working in education. Another real exciting bill is being carried by Representative Wendy Boy. That one would allow, that would provide a state tribal education accord that would, it's modeled after one that was recently adopted in Alaska, and it was informed by one that's been around a little bit longer in Washington. And that would establish a task force basically to look at how to have a government to government relationship with the tribes around Montana to address the educational needs. And so this bill, and it's House Bill 394, this bill would establish that task force to have these relationships and put together some ideas for improving that educational dynamic with the different unique needs of the different reservations. And that task force would come back with some proposed legislation for the next session about how to accomplish that. That bill passed out of the executive action just yesterday.
Thank you. And if I could just add to this as well, the federal law that governs public education at this point, the Every Student Succeed Act, demands that we have rigorous action after 3 years of serving schools that have been ranked. And so this discussion, this accord, authentic discussion, meaningful consultation is part of that strategy in order for us to really understand what it is that we can do to serve our students that are in that bottom 5%. So we are very pleased that a committee that's not education, but energy, technology, and federal relations understand the immediacy and the relevance of having authentic tribal consultation and pass it out unanimously. So very pleased with Representative Wendy Boyd and his emphatic discussion on making sure that not just Indian education for all, but that tribal children, authentic discussion happens to make sure that they have the best foot forward in education and in their life. So very pleased.
Yeah, and superintendent, we're running short on time. There's just a lot of activity that's of interest to OPI at the legislature. I'll highlight one more. And that's one that's being carried by Representative Seekins Crow. It was heard in the House Education Committee on Friday. It's House Bill 501. And that bill, it's interesting. Textbook dealers who come to Montana don't have any obligation to try to be responsive to Montana's content standards. And so when the superintendent is approving textbook dealer licenses under current law, they're only required to do two things. Number one, give us assurances that they'll charge us a good price for the textbooks. And number two, provide a surety bond so that we have some indication that they've got financial stability to do business in Montana. But there's nothing that addresses whether the textbooks even address the teaching content standards that is required in Montana. And so this bill would require the textbook dealers to demonstrate to the superintendent of public instruction where those textbooks address the different content standards that the Board of Public Education adopts.
Exactly. Lots of interesting things that are happening and will continue to happen. I feel like we're kind of like news anchors here.
Well,
Anyway, there's a lot of work that is left to be done. Very proud of, I talk to the pages every week and we had a new crop of pages. And just to get their understanding and listening to them as they walk through the halls with these honorables in the House and the Senate. So I want to appreciate your time with us today. I don't want to extend it any longer than what we have. We have great work that is occurring in our public schools. We have great work that's occurring here at the Office of Public Instruction, and want to thank you for being a participant. Reach out to us. All the information will flow as soon as we conclude this meeting, and blessings to you as spring is almost upon us. Thank you.